All right, my friends, good to be with you. Today, chapter 28 of Genesis. Um, so, sorry to move things around just a touch. So last week, we looked at Jacob and Esau and the family of Isaac, Rebekah, Jacob, right? The whole crew. And especially, we looked at, there it goes. Jacob steals the blessing, right? Esau and Isaac mourn the loss, and then Rebekah tells Jacob to flee to her brother Laban. And that's super overview, but that's the basics of chapter 27. It's the great theft, the highway robbery of the blessing that are plotted by Rebekah and Isaac against Jacob and Esau. Today, we just jump right into chapter 27. The end of 27, there's one verse that we didn't follow because it really connects more with chapter 28. So Rebekah said to Yitzhak, I loathe my life because of those Hittite women. If Yaakov should take a wife from the Hittite women like these, from the women of the land, why should I have life? So continuing there on 28. So Yitzhak called for Yaakov, and he blessed him and commanded him, saying to him, you are not to take a wife from the women of Canaan. Arise, go to the country of Aram, to the house of Bethuel, your mother's father, and take yourself a wife from there, from the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. And may God Shaddai bless you. May he make you bear fruit and make you many, so that you become a host of peoples. And may he give you the blessing of Abraham, to you and to your seed with you, for you to inherit the land of your sojournings, which God gave Abraham. So Yitzhak sent Yaakov off, and he went to the country of Aram, to Laban, son of Bethuel the Aramean, the brother of Rivkah, the mother of Yaakov and Esau. Now Esau saw that Yitzhak had given Yaakov farewell blessing, and had sent him to the country of Aram to take himself a wife from there. And that when he had given him blessing, he had commanded him, saying, you are not to take a wife from the women of Canaan. And Yaakov had listened to his father and his mother, and had gone to the country of Aram. Esau saw that the women of Canaan were bad in the eyes of Yitzhak, his father. So Esau went to Ishmael and took Malahat, daughter of Ishmael, son of Abraham, sister of Nebaioth, in addition to his wives as well. All right, so Brueggemann doesn't look too highly on these few verses. He says these verses are an intrusion into the primary narrative. You can pretty much cut them off and you would miss nothing about what was going on. He understands them to be mainly from the priestly narrative, and there's two big points. There's a mild critique of Esau, like that he shouldn't have married these two Hittite women. And two, there's sort of this alternative for Jacob's flight to Laban. It's not just because he stole the blessing and Esau is going to kill him, but because Jacob also needed to marry a good wife, a better wife than the Hittite women are, right? That's about it, according to Brueggemann. I think Brueggemann might sell it a little short personally. So the Murray critique, and I think this is a big one, it goes to motive for the whole incident, for the whole stealing of the blessing, the whole conversation. That is, Brueggemann and the narrative are obsessed with the blessing. They're so concerned with it. For that, Freetham, a couple of other critics I looked at, they're all really concerned about what's Isaac's role, what's Jacob's role, what's Esau's role, maybe a little bit for Rebekah, but it's all about the blessing, right? But this is the narrative, like this goes to the motive, like why was Rebekah willing to plot against her husband is in these few verses, right? And for you don't remember, we learned in 26:35 that Esau married two Hittite women, and she did not like them in 26:35, and they were a bitterness of spirit to Yitzhak and Rivkah. It messed up their marriage. They didn't, I guess Isaac was okay with it. Rebekah did not like these women. Something happened and it did not go well. The daughters-in-law and the mother-in-law did not play well together. Then at the end of our whole story, I loathe my life because of those Hittite women. So clearly Rebekah is not a fan of the Hittite brides of Esau, that they have made things pretty nasty and terrible. Messed up her marriage, messed up her life. Things are pretty ugly in the midst of that, right? So I would argue that those two verses create that inclusio, that narrative sandwich, because she hates the new wives and refuses to have Jacob be a part of the same situation. We skip over those, which I find fascinating. Like none of the scholars that I read really talked about this, but this is exactly what we talk about all the time in Mark's narrative, in the narratives of the New Testament. When there is a story that then connects to a story later, oh, what does that mean? That informs everything in between. But for some reason, because it's Rebecca, we just sort of discard it here. I would say that's to our poverty, to the poverty of the story, right? Freetham does note, and this is a sad moment, that Isaac addresses Jacob for the first time in the narrative as Jacob, right? So Isaac had talked to Jacob, but he thought he was Esau. He hasn't actually had a conversation with his son in the narrative until this moment when he blesses him and then sends him away. That's Isaac's first conversation with his son, or at least with Jacob. He talks to Esau a lot, but he does not talk to Jacob, right? Or realizing that it's Jacob. But again, Freetham focuses more on the blessing and what all of that means. He doesn't get all of that. He just says, in the face of the powerlessness, patriarchy engenders manipulation of often remains the only route open to the future. So his argument is this is the only choice that she had. That is, Rebecca only had this choice to sort of work behind the scenes because she had to defer to Isaac. I guess that's certainly partially true. But again, I think we can learn and see Rebecca as the primary agent here. Like even that sort of way he's framed it seems to think of her as a secondary character, but I think Rebecca is literally the entirety of the characters involved. She's the one who makes the plot. She's the one who tells her son to do it. She's the one who covers for him with her husband and then also helps him get away, right? I mean, it's Rebecca start to finish in this story. And especially it's her if we look at those two verses and say she did all of this because she does not want her son to be stuck with Hittite women, right? So this is like, it's her story, at least in my opinion. This is the Murray edit. We can disagree. You can disagree with me totally, but she's the one who sets an emotion. She makes the choices. She wants a better life for her son, Jacob, both in terms of the blessing and to get him out of the wives. Doesn't matter which one it is. It's Rebecca who's making the work. And yes, it is through manipulation. I agree with Freetham on that, but I feel like she's getting a pretty low billing here for something that she's 100% behind, right? Jacob goes along with it, but he didn't come up with the idea. Isaac doesn't know what's going on. Esau's not even in the building. It's Rebecca's story, but somehow it's become a story about Jacob, Esau, and Isaac, right? So I guess my question to all of us is this a man's story where the woman hangs in the background? A woman's story about subterfuge against the patriarchy, or maybe a story about a family in turmoil? I don't know. What do y'all think? I just think there's more conversation that we could have there than just automatically accepting that it's the story of fathers and sons.
Depending on your point of view, it could be all of those.
Yeah.
Certainly it's about a family in turmoil.
It is certainly that. Yeah.
It is certainly that. Okay.
They are not doing well, whatever's going on, whether it's they don't like the Hittites or we got to get my son out of here or what. It is not a good spot.
It appears that the turmoil is caused by the marriage to the Hittite women.
Yeah.
That's what appears to be the catalyst for this turmoil.
Absolutely. It's what the Bible says, right? It's the text itself says it's because of this bad situation with the daughters involved.
Mm-hmm.
Bill, what's the problem with Hittites?
We don't know. We don't get a list of what terrible things these daughter-in-laws have done. I mean, there's always in these texts the idea that they're pagan. You know, there's sort of that subtle critique that, oh, well, if you're part of Abraham's family, then at least you know who God is. But these Hittites are probably polytheists who worshiping their gods, causing all kinds of trouble. But nothing, we don't get that story, right? That's the story I'd love to know, but we don't get it.
I guess something we haven't talked about or don't talk about, but I find absolutely fascinating, is that Esau, okay, married one of the daughters of Ishmael.
Yeah.
Okay. And I find that wonderful, actually. Okay. But that, it's like everybody just kind of skips over that.
Well,
Okay.
this is also where I have a unbelievable pity for Esau, right? I mean, like, he's like, oh, I just found out my mom and my dad hate my wives, and
Mm.
now I've got to marry another woman to make them happy, right? I mean, it's a weird, like, he learns about it secondhand as his brother is sent away. It's a fascinating sort of turn, right, across the board for that side of it, right? That Esau has found out that his mom does. He probably had a pretty good idea they didn't get along, but that his dad did too, and was willing to send his brother out to find the right woman or whatever it is. I mean, like, wow, that's nasty family dynamics right there, to say the least.
So the problem with in-laws is centuries and upon centuries old, right, Bill?
Yeah, this is nothing new.
Yeah.
Nothing new under the sun.
Got it. Okay.
Nothing new under the sun. It is one of my favorite prophecies of Jesus, where he says, that I come to bring division, and I'll have, fathers will rise up against sons, and sons against their fathers, and daughters against their mothers, mothers against their daughters. And then he goes, and mother-in-laws versus their daughter-in-laws. And I'm like, oh, I don't know if that's a really that one doesn't ever seem to be as tough to imagine, Jesus, but okay, fair enough.
He might have been talking about this story.
He might well. Might well indeed. All right, so any other comments for all that? So we'll keep going. The next part, Yaakov went out from Beersheba and went towards Haran and encountered a certain place. He had to spend the night there, for the sun had come in. Now he took one of the stones of the place and set it at his head and laid down in that place. All right, so I'm going to take a minute. This is the large, though there's a whole story beyond this, but this is one of those, because of our world, I have to make a quick side comment. Random fascinating aside about our Anglican heritage. Jacob sleeps on a rock pillow, right? I've never understood that when I was little, and I don't understand it now. I don't care how bad I want to rest. I'm not putting a rock up as a pillow. Fair enough. Does anyone know where folks claim the rock to be now? Any ideas?
Nope.
The declaration, in England at least, is that it lives in Edinburgh Castle in Scotland. Okay, here's the story. There's the rock. It's in Edinburgh Castle. You can see it anytime you go to Edinburgh. Every king of Scotland from Fergus, who was the first king of the Scots in 498, has been crowned on that rock. They have knelt on that rock and then been anointed king of Scotland. In 1296, Edward I of the English of England stole it from Scotland, and every English monarch since him has been crowned on it as well. So from 498 to the present, all the kings of England and Scotland have been crowned on this stone, right? And we'll see it again in May when Charles III is crowned King of the United Kingdoms of England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, right? So it is a rock that has been used a lot. And that's Elizabeth sitting on it when she was consecrated. And yes, it slides under the seat, right? So they're put on their throne, but the stone underneath it there is what is called the stone of destiny or the stone of scone. But it is believed to be, the tradition holds, that is the rock that Jacob slept on. That's what the Great Declaration is from England. And they'll probably talk about it when they have Charles's coronation. They'll say, oh, it's Jacob's stone. It's the stone of destiny. They claim that the prophet Jeremiah sailed that stone to Ireland. I have not heard the rest of that story. I really want to hear the rest of that story. I'm not sure why Jeremiah was leaving Israel and going all the way to Ireland to drop off a rock. But that's what they claim.
Sounds like something from the Book of Mormon.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Or maybe he flew there. Maybe he flew there with some angels and got some help. I'm not really sure. They claim that that's how the Stone of Destiny got to Ireland and then in turn to Scotland and England to become the Stone of Destiny. Unfortunately, those pesky scientists have done analysis on it and said the stone was likely quarried near Scone Palace in Scotland, that it is has all the markers of being a stone from that location. It doesn't make it any less ancient or any less interesting, but it's not probably Jacob's pillow, as they sometimes call it, or the Stone of Destiny. But so they, like I said, they sometimes call it the Stone of Scone. That's probably the more appropriate term. Just in case they bring it up, it's a random English and really English and Scottish factoid that they'll say that that's Jacob's pillow and the Stone of Destiny, right? Are the same, one and the same.
I want so
Probably
bad
not.
to hear the story of why Jeremiah went to Ireland. I need to hear
I,
that.
I need to
God,
find
I
that
need to hear
story.
it. Okay.
The Irish have some great stories. I would love to hear how that one works, right? But
Yeah, I would too.
I need to. I'll look that up for next time.
Thank you. All right.
So anyway, any questions about that? It's a random aside, but it is funny, and it's one that especially in the next 6 months here, or whatever it'll be, 4 months, that we'll see it again. All right. So back to the story. So Jacob puts up his rock pillow and he dreamt. Here, a ladder was set up on the earth, its top reaching the heavens, and here, messengers of God were going up and down on it. And here, the Lord was standing over against him. He said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Yitzhak. The land on which you lie, I give to you and to your seed. Your seed will be like the dust of the earth. You will burst forth to the sea, to the east, to the north, to the Negev. All the clans of the soil will find blessing through you and through your seed. Here, I am with you. I will watch over you wherever you go and will bring you back to the soil. Indeed, I will not leave until I've done what I have spoken to you. Yaakov awoke from his sleep and said, why the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. He was awestruck and said, how awe-inspiring is this place? This is none other than the house of God, and that is the gate of heaven. Yaakov started early in the morning. He took the stone that he had set at his head and set it up as a standing pillar and poured oil on top of it. And he called the name of the place Bethel, house of God. However, Luz was the name of the city in former times. And Yaakov vowed a vow, saying, if God will be with me and will watch over me on this way that I go and will give me food to eat and a garment to wear, if I come back in peace to my father's house, the Lord shall be God to me. And this stone that I have set up as a standing pillar shall become a house of God. And everything that you give me, I shall tithe it to you. All right. So Jacob's ladder, this is a great term. The technical word is sulam, but it's a hapax legomenon. There's your 75-cent word of the day. A hapax legomenon is a word that's only used once in all of the language. In this case, sulam is only used one time in the entire Bible or in all of Hebrew writing, and it's here. So the short answer is we don't know what the heck people were going up and down. We assume it's a ladder because there are angels going up and down it, but it's something connecting earth and heaven, right? As a result, a lot of people think it is more connected actually to this image. This is in Abraham's hometown, had a large ziggurat. That was in Ur. If you remember, that's where Abraham starts his journey. They had a large ziggurat, and the ziggurats all had these great stairways. So yes, we can probably say it's maybe a stairway to heaven, that more than a ladder that he saw. The important part is not what it is. Salam can mean ladder, it could mean ziggurat, it could mean stairway. What's more important is that God is connecting heaven and earth, right? That's the more important part of the conversation. that this is all somehow God has drawn near, and is especially drawn near Jacob, right? Who has been effectively exiled. He doesn't have a wife, he doesn't have a family, he doesn't have a home. He's not supposed to even really come back. He's certainly in conflict with his brother, and sounds like his parents are in horrible conflict with his brother and the Hittite wives. I mean, it's all a big mess. And really, he lays down in the middle of nowhere, right? That's the other thing we can say for Jacob. He literally lays down in the middle of nowhere, but suddenly realizes that God is in this place, not knowing that God was even there, right? Which is a blessing unto itself. We visited Jacob's well this summer, or one of his wells this summer, a place where Jesus met the woman at the well. It's really a church that claims to be over a well, that it was Jacob's well. Who knows? But it's a beautiful church. The well is still functioning, and it has sweet water. The water was very good. We drank from it. But they had a wonderful icon of Jacob's ladder that I particularly love, just to share with you an image of this, right? Maybe perhaps of Jacob's vision there, of angels going up and coming down to heaven. Of course, it's an Orthodox icon, so Mary gets in there somehow. Instead of God being at the top, it's Mary and Jesus. But it is an interesting little icon. It's a beautiful image of angels going up and down the stairway, the ladder, the whatever to heaven that it is. Anyway, so we'll go forward. While Brueggemann did not have a lot to say about that interim chapter, he has a lot to say about this, but I found his quote here being particularly helpful. This narrative raises difficult questions about the nature of an encounter with God. Really, on the one hand, we may be tempted to imagine that this is a primitive religious report that has no pertinence to modern reality, for we have outgrown such matters like this vision idea or this sort of silly conversation with God in our dreams. But on the other hand, we may wish to explain it psychologically and deny its objective reality. But neither of these will do. The narrative shatters our presuppositions. It insists the world is a place of such meetings between God and humanity, right? It is the wonder, mystery, and shock that this God should be present in such a decisive way to this exiled one. The miracle is the way this sovereign God binds himself to this treacherous fugitive. The event is told as an inexplicable experience. Thoughts on that idea from Brueggemann? Personally, I like it, but I just want to see what y'all thought about that quote from him.
I mean, this story kind of explains, I'm thinking, okay, how Jacob finds God.
Yes.
Because God's not in the story. God has not been in the story with Jacob until now.
Not other than the sort of random oracle at the beginning saying, I'll go with the younger one, right? God has that one oracle to Rebecca, not to anybody else.
But
just
to Rebecca, but not to Jacob. Right.
Not to Jacob.
Not to Jacob. Okay.
And not to Isaac, for that matter.
Yeah. Well, Isaac, okay. Well, I think we talk enough about Isaac. Okay. I mean, I think for all intents and purposes, except for fathering children, is a non-entity. Okay. I mean,
yeah, he is not.
He's not. Yeah. He doesn't play a major role except in the story. Okay. At all. And I don't know. This just to me is just how Jacob finds God.
Yeah.
He discovers God.
Or God discovers Jacob, right?
Or God discovers. Well, I would hope God had already discovered Jacob, but that's
God reveals God's self to Jacob, right?
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, okay, and which I think is necessary, okay, because now God becomes part of the story. God was not, or he or she was not the part of the story before. Now God is part of the story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I think in the story up to now, we have been looking for God, haven't we?
Yeah, we've been wondering where God is. It's certainly in the deception and the blessing and that process, right? Yeah.
would God be part of this subterfuge and all that kind of thing? I mean, we were struggling with that concept, okay? But
Yes,
now God is definitely a part of the story.
absolutely. And God has taken a side, right?
Mhm. Mm. Yeah, Jacob's side
Mhm.
or Jacob's side, depending how you will.
Yaakov, yep.
Okay.
The other, I want to go back and just look at the text real fast. So I ran out of time to actually put in slides for the rest, but the fascinating thing is we have the sort of classic first part of this narrative when God says, I am God of Abraham, your father, God of Isaac. And then he repeats the things that we have heard, like 13 and 14 here are exactly the same things that he promised to Abraham and to Isaac, right? I will give you land, and to you and to your seed, you will have lots and lots of children. They will go forth everywhere. There'll be tons of them. All the clans of the soil will find blessing through you and through your seed, right? Those are exactly the same promises that God has made to both Abraham and Isaac. What changes and is fascinating, I think Brueggemann's right in pointing this out, is what comes next, which is, I will watch over you wherever you will go, which is a very different promise than Abraham's, which was, I want you to go to the land of the promise and I'll take care of you there, right? This is, well, you're sort of in a mess, dude. So I'm going to go with you into the wilderness while you figure this all out. And I'm not going to leave you until I have done what I have spoken to you, right? That's a very, very different promise than the promise that was made to Abraham and to Isaac. It's a Emmanuel promise, right? Like God with you promise, not a like if you do, like here's my covenant, and if you follow my decrees and all these kinds of other things. This is just like God's like, all right, I'm in it with you. You're a mess, but I'm going. Which I think is where Brueggemann is right in saying, like, the scandalous or the miraculous thing, either way, we could say it either way, is that God chooses to really connect and ally himself with Jacob, the heel grabber, the troublemaker, even as he's in exile, right? Thoughts on that side of it?
But in all it seems to me like in most of the stories where God reaches out, okay, the people like Moses, okay, they're already in exile. They're all in exile. It's kind of funny, yeah, how these stories work. Yeah. I mean, Abraham wasn't in exile, but okay, but
Yeah. No, I mean, I think there's something to be said for God tends to find people at their worst, not at their best. It is seldom that it's only maybe Solomon, right? That God shows up when he's starting as king, that God shows up. Most of the rest of the time it's things are not going well at all. And so God shows up to go like, all right, I got you.
Does it talk about anywhere Jacob's relationship with God prior to the dream and sleeping on the rock and all that in previous chapters?
Nope. Nope. God's gone silent really, apart from he had the conversation, like I said, with Rebecca, that
Right.
one line sort of prophecy. And he certainly talked to Isaac earlier, renewing the covenant with him in chapter 26, but nothing with Jacob one-on-one, which is the sort of tragedy of Jacob in a lot of ways, is his dad doesn't even talk to him until he sends him away. His mom only talks to him to get him to steal the birthright. I mean, he's sort of this weird abandoned character, even in the midst of family.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I mean, it's I like the word inexplicable. I mean, we can say that Jacob hasn't done anything to deserve this. I mean, this is not about merit.
Yeah.
You know, you know, it's, I guess if you're going to choose, you'd say it's grace. And, you know, here's, you know, Jacob in the middle of nowhere,
Mhm.
and, you know, all alone, and hard to say how things are going to work out. And all of a sudden he senses that, you know, God is with him, God cares, and that God is going to be with him wherever he goes. And it's pretty powerful.
Yeah, you definitely didn't earn it. That's for sure. But no one does. I mean, that's if there is a theme between all the patriarchs, none of them earn it. God just shows up and says, "All right, I'm with you." We don't know why Abraham got chosen. You know, we've got some midrash and some backstories that we claim, but they're not. That's made up. That's not in the text. Same with Isaac. Other than being the son of Abraham, he has no real credentials. But yeah, it is rather inexplicable. Grace is about the only way we can say it. It's God's free will chosen blessing, right? So Freetham does point out, which I actually like this as well. Jacob's response, he's awestruck. Wow, this place is amazing. This is the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. Incidentally, does anybody know where that is in our building? We have that saying, the gate of heaven. You walk over it every Sunday you come to church. It's right there in the front entryway. When we go into the sanctuary, there's a marker that says this was blessed by Neil Alexander, the gate of heaven. This is the gate of heaven. It's a quote from this. With the idea that anytime we're with God, we're with God in heaven, right? So our sanctuary is listed as the gate of heaven as well. Any sanctuary is. But Yaakov, you know, is super excited. This is wonderful. He makes a pillar. He pours some oil on it. He calls it the house of God, which becomes, from what we can tell, the second leading center. Jerusalem's number one, and the Bethel is the second most important worship location in Israel for certainly the period of the judges and the kings. It's one of those major worship sites because that was where Jacob met God, found God, or God found Jacob, or whichever you want to say it, and made this sort of covenant, right? So it's a big deal. But the part that I love that Freetham noted is Jacob is always the wheeler and dealer. So even after really getting this unmerited, undeserved grace, his response is, first, it's causative, like, oh, if God's with me. Not like, oh, God's with me, so therefore I promise to do this. Like, you just saw God, and now you're saying, like, if he's with you, he just told you he was with you. But Jacob is sort of still pushing his bets, edging things a little bit. And he basically says, oh, if God will be with me, which God promises, watch over me, which God promises, on this way that I go. And then he adds, and will give me food and a garment to wear. He adds to the bargain, right? And if God gives me something to wear and something to eat, yeah, he can be my God. I mean, you can eat that, you can read that in a variety of ways, but I just liked Freetham saying, like, even in this vulnerable moment, all alone, he adds these sort of deals. And if I come back in peace to my father's house, if when I come home, everything's fixed, okay, the Lord shall be God to me.
If I come back in peace, right? I love it.
If all these things happen, yeah, we got to deal.
It's not when, it's if. Got it. Okay.
Yeah. Which is why sometimes I do love, I mean, Jacob can drive me nuts, but I do love him in a lot of ways because he's definitely all of us, right? Like, well, if this happens, maybe, I don't know. Yeah. If, like, there's definitely no concern. You know, we have all these verses later about, like, oh, never put the Lord your God to the test. I'm like, have you read Jacob's story? Because that's all Jacob does.
Well, and I think, how many times, every one of us that says, God, if you do this, I'll do this. I think every one of us has done that at some point in time.
Oh,
We've all been deal makers with God.
We've all made our bargains.
Yeah.
It's kind of like what, I mean, it kind of reminds me of what Dietrich Bonhoeffer calls cheap grace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd agree. I'd agree. And everything I give, I will tithe it to you. Which I've always
Right. Okay.
okay. Sounds
Right.
good. It'd be interesting to I don't think we get a record of that pro or con.
Yeah.
But I imagine it's like all of us on that side too, that oh God, if this will just happen, I will do this, I will fix this for you. And it's like,
Yep.
well, God might come through, but half the time we don't, or
Okay.
more. I use an I statement. I don't half the time, maybe more. God, I'll just do this, this, and this. Oh, it worked. I can't do that. I can't do my side. What are you talking about? Oh my goodness. All right. So that's the end of this chapter. The next part is Jacob making it to Laban and the whole conversation about getting his wives and children and all that kind of fun stuff in chapter 29 and 30. So there was no real easy breaking point other than to sort of stop there. Do we want to meet next week? Is that a good time for everybody, or do we need to just say wait until January? I can do next week. It's clear on my calendar. I just didn't know how it is for all of you.
Well, it doesn't work for me, but don't change on my account. I'm going to be on the road.
But I'll be available.
Okay. All right. And Stefano and I talked earlier. He said he could do it. Well, I'll just email everybody and see what they can do, because there's other folks that might be able to or not. It's a tricky time of year for sure with Christmas. So, but well, good to be with you today, my friends. Pray you have a good day, and we'll see you this Sunday, if not before.
Great,
Don't
thank
miss everybody.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Happy holidays. Merry Christmas.
Merry
Okay.
Christmas.
Merry Christmas.